So have you ever wondered what Jesus looks like? There have been all kinds of images about it, but have you ever wondered what Jesus looks like? I'm here to tell you today that I know. And I have a picture of Jesus, and that is exactly what Jesus looks like. And the reason I know that is because from the time that I came home as a newborn baby till I left 18 years later, that picture was on our living room wall, and my mom told me all the time, that's Jesus, and he's watching whatever you do in this room, and he goes with you wherever you go, and he's watching whatever you do wherever you are. And so in my mind, that has always been what Jesus looks like. And my guess is a lot of you have this same image in your brain. It gets burned in your brain because this image, I found contrasting data, but this was painted in 1940, and there have been at least 500 million copies, prints sold since 1940, and some say over 1 billion. So there's a whole lot of people walking around. That's the image of Jesus. And you've got some image, maybe it's a different image, but you've got an image of Jesus in your mind. It gets burned in your brain from movies and paintings and whatever. And so you know that this is what Jesus looks like. But you're wrong. This is not what Jesus looks like. Even if this is a pretty accurate depiction of what he looked like while on earth, that was 33 years. And before those 33 years, Jesus existed eternally, and he had a very different form than the one that he came to the earth in. And after the resurrection and after the ascension, after his work was done and he showed us how to do life, he went back to the prior form that he had. In fact, Hebrews kind of explains it for us. In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9, it says, we do see Jesus who was, past tense, who was made lower than the angels. It kind of tells you where we rank in this, in the categories of priority in the kingdom, right? Jesus goes even lower than the angels to become human form. And it says for a little while, 30 years, 33 years, he took that human form. But after his work was done, he goes back to true form. And Hebrews continues. Now, speaking of Jesus, crowned with glory and honor. That first picture is a very cool picture. But that's not what Jesus looks like. What he looks like now, and I can't tell you how it appears, how he appears, but I do know this. He is pure glory and honor. And that's very different than human form. In fact, when Jesus was facing crucifixion, he prayed in John 17, now, O Father, glorify me with the glory which I had with you. He's praying this while he's on earth, that short lifespan, which I had with you before the world was. So he said, God, we're getting ready to do this, saying, return me to my glory then. And so that's Jesus. Jesus is pure glory, and we will see him. We're going to see him. We're going to see him again. And do you know why we're going to see him again? He's coming back. Yeah. Oh, good. I got some ameners today. Good. I like ameners. He's coming back. He will return. And he's not coming back in human form. He's not going to do that again. This is very, very different now. So the text that we're going to be looking at is Matthew 25, and this is Jesus himself speaking. He says, when the Son of Man comes in his, he's coming back in glory, and all the angels with him. And Revelation 5 says that there are thousands upon thousands of angels. In fact, it says there are 10,000 times 10,000 angels. And so we've got stadiums. I need you to put your imaginators on, okay? Everybody needs to imagine this picture that I'm giving you. Jesus is coming back, and he is full of glory. He is pure glory. And with him, when he comes, are stadium-sized groupings, multitudes of angels. All those 10,000 by 10,000, they are coming with him. And he will sit on his glorious throne. Who sits on thrones? kings. So King Jesus, all his glory, stadiums full of angels, he's coming, he's going to show up, and we will see him as that glorious king. And all those things that fill in the picture there, surrounded by angels. We're going to see that Jesus. And then in verse 32 it says, as that happens, can you picture that? As that happens, when he comes, all the nations will be gathered before him. All people, all nations, all souls that have ever been created will be gathered before him. Now, I want to get into a disclaimer here, just to keep anybody from getting tripped up. There are some people who believe the story that we are looking at in Matthew 25 is a parable. And there's a good reason for people to think that, a very good reason. Because Jesus in Matthew chapter 24, he's talking about the end times. In Matthew 25, he's talking about the end times. And as he approaches the end of chapter 25, there's a parable about the end times, and there's another parable about the end times, and then there's this story about the end times. And so it makes logical sense that this is a parable, okay? There are other people who say, no, this is Jesus prophetically telling this event is going to happen, it's going to look just like this. Now, here's the important point. I don't care what you believe. It does not matter to me. You can believe whichever one of those you want, just grab it and go with it, and you can argue and all that kind of stuff. Don't argue with me, because we're not arguing about it. I'm not debating. I don't want emails from you. I don't want you to convince me which one is right. I'm not going to mess with it. Because the only thing I care about this is that we gather some really important, strong truths, and we take them home with us, because that is so much more important than who's right in this debate. So would you go through this story with me, recognizing that Jesus has something vitally important to say to you before we go home today? Is anybody ready for that? Okay, let's just let Jesus speak to us through this whole thing. So we've got this glorified Jesus on a throne, surrounded by people and every person. And so I just want you to think about that scene. We got every soul in this scene. And whether they are rich or poor or young or old or black or white or red or green, or they're goofballs or they're addicts or they're entrepreneurs or they're incredibly talented, they're gifted, they're famous, or they're knuckleheads, everybody's there. There's no exceptions. Even got politicians there. Everybody's going to be there. And I know which category the politicians. Sorry if there's one here. Everybody's going to be there. It's real simple, church. There's a real simple distinction. Everybody's divided into one or two groups. And it says, and he's going to separate that whole group, the people one from another, as a shepherd separates sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Again, very simple distinction. And then he's going to say to those who are on his right, that's the sheep, come, you who are blessed by my Father. All right, I got to tell you, when I'm working on this sermon, I read that little sentence right there, and man, it just something goes on inside of me that just jazzes my spirit and jazzes my soul. And I saw a couple of you, the same thing happened to your faces. Jesus is going to say to those on the right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. And actually, earlier this morning, when I was looking at this again, when I read that, I just, in my spirit, I kind of went, like good chocolate pie, you know? It feeds that soul. And so I don't know if that's happening with you or not. I hope it is. But you need to let that sink in. Jesus, that Jesus is going to say to you, come. Come, because the Father is going to bless you. Inherit the kingdom. What? Inherit the kingdom prepared for you. That's another That Jesus, saying that to us. Prepared for you from the foundation of the world. So I want you to picture this and be encouraged by this, whether it's parable or actual foretelling of events, the message is the same. Jesus will look at you, look at his sheep, and he will say, come on with me. Come on. You're going to hang with me. We're going to be together. And you know what else is true about you? You are blessed by the Father, and you're going to inherit a kingdom that has been designed for you from the beginning of time. Church, what will it be like to stand before Jesus and you specifically, to you specifically, he says, come with me. I've got a kingdom for you. You are blessed. You are blessed by God. What in the world will that be like? I'll just tell you this, it's good to be a sheep. It's good to be a sheep. Good to be a sheep. But then it gets kind of weird and confusing, and I don't even understand it. The sheep group, they're confused. Jesus says to them, after he says all that, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. Thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you took me in. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you looked after me. I was in prison and you visited me. The sheep are like, huh? That didn't happen. Jesus, we never saw you anywhere like that. We didn't see, we would have helped you, but we didn't see you in need anywhere. What are you talking about? The righteous will say, Lord, when do we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When do we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? When do we see you sick or in prison? And Jesus, that's not true. That didn't happen. I don't know what you're talking about. It's just not true. And Jesus says, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. The king replied, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. That word least is really important because I want you to know who he's talking about. That word least means least in strength, least in size, and it's kind of figurative. Like, you know, they don't have metaphysical kind of weight to like accomplish something. But here's the one that gets me the most. It means the least in dignity. They're just hurting in life. They're missing something in life, and they can't provide everything that they need for themselves. And that's a hard spot to be in, and you don't have any dignity when you got to ask for help. And so I want you to think about that, the least of these. Now, just 9 verses earlier, we saw Jesus as the spectacular, glorified King of Kings, surrounded by angels and trumpets. This crazy, crazy, magnificent scene. That's what Jesus looks like now. And now 9 verses later, we have Jesus looking like a homeless guy, a woman who can't feed her kids who need clothes, a teenage girl just got out of juvie, has no place to go. You want to know what Jesus looks like? Both of those. Both of those. God didn't say to those guys, hey, you know what, man, good job taking care of those people that needed you. Good job. He says, good job taking care of me. That's different. Good job taking care of me. Well, so then what about the goats? Verse 41. And he will say to those on his left, now remember what the sheep got told. The sheep were told, come, be with me, you're blessed. Come, let's go hang out. To the goats, they get, depart from me. Just the opposite. You who are cursed into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. I was hungry, you gave me nothing to eat. I'm not going to go through all that. Very same things that he said to the sheep. And he says, and you know what? You guys didn't do anything for me. Those people were there, they needed your help, and you didn't do squat for them. And the goats are saying, what? They're as confused as the sheep. That never happened. Jesus, we would never do that to you. Jesus, if you needed food or clothing, whatever, we would absolutely make sure you had. He says, no, you didn't. They said, that's not true. And he says the same thing to them. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, someone who just doesn't have the potential, the capacity for dignity, It's just not there. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. And they will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. The same glorified Jesus, that big, magnificent, glorified Jesus, looked at these folks and he said, you didn't do squat for me. You know what you did? You made excuses, and you made reasons, and you made judgments, and you made discernments, and you made analysis, and you decided that because of your thinking, you don't have to do what Christ is asking you to do. You think that you left people with little dignity in need, and Jesus says, you left me in need. I don't know. What's the opposite of Whatever that is, I need to express it right now. This is rough stuff. Now, there's also a theological elephant in the room here, and it's this. There's a great tension and battle between works and grace. And if you look at this story in Matthew 25, it looks like the only thing that matters about you, where you spend eternal life, is when you help people or when you don't. And if you look at this whole story, it looks like Jesus is just saying, hey, here's the deal. You help me, you go to heaven. You don't help me, you go to hell. But the Bible, man, I should spend a lot more time on this than I can. The Bible is so full of rich information and challenging information and life-changing information and new understanding. And if you just look at one tiny little piece of it, man, you're going to miss stuff. And that's what happens when we just grab a hold of Matthew 25 and don't look at anything else. If that's where you are, read Ephesians. The whole book of Ephesians is, you know what? Works don't matter. It's all about God's grace. It is all about God's love. And you can't do squat to earn it. You got John 3:16. God so loved the world, whoever believes in him is saved. Matthew 16 says you got to believe and be better. You got to bring all of that together. And when you do that, the tensions disappear, because here's what happens. We think, we got enemies, works and grace. We got enemies, faith and activity. We have enemies, and everybody has a position on that. You all have a position on that. And I'm going to say it again. I don't care what it is. Doesn't matter to me what it is. Because here's the truth. They are not enemies. We make them enemies. Oh, it's all about God's grace. Oh, you got to do what Jesus tells us to do. It's that they're not enemies. They're teammates, church. They are teammates. They work together. And this is a tandem. And when we got both of those things cooking in our hearts and our mind and our activity, then we are doing what Jesus called us to do. You go ahead and be full of grace and forgiveness as much as you possibly can. But don't sit around on your butt and don't do anything. You know what James says about that? It says faith without works is dead. It's dead. Like, man, your faith ain't going to do anything without works. It's dying. It's shriveling up. You're not giving it any nourishment, any water, nothing, any life. It just dies. And you don't end up doing squat. And Jesus seems to think it's very important what we do, doesn't he? Way back in the Old Testament, before Jesus even came, he's still in this glorious form, before he ever came in human form. Way back 600 years before he came, we are told in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26, God says, I'm going to give you a new heart, and I'm going to put a new spirit in you, and I will remove from you your heart of stone. Church, unless that's happened to you, you got a heart of stone. You hear this? You got a heart of stone. He's going to take that heart of stone out and give you a heart of flesh. Do you know what stony hearts do to help people? Nothing. Because they're cold. Stony hearts are just cold, see some kind of need, I'm all about me. And that's why we make up all these excuses. You know what? I'm not going to enable them. That's just going to help them. Why don't they get a job like I got it? And we have all this analysis and all this psychology, and we think we come up with all this stuff so that we can keep our stony hearts and don't have to serve and don't have to give and don't have to love. And Jesus says, listen, this is not how we're going to do life. Here's how we're going to do life. You are going to live according to that new heart, and you are going to live according to that new spirit. And I'm going to put my spirit in you, and I'm going to live with you. I'm going to walk through life with you. And church, listen to me. How in the world can we be someone who has a stone cold heart, and we are empty, and we don't have the Spirit of Christ, and we don't have the presence of Christ, and this is who we are and how we live, and these are our actions. And then something comes along where we meet him, and we get a new heart, and we get a new spirit, and we have the Holy Spirit, and we have the presence of Christ. How can that life not be different than the first one? It has to change. We have to be people who have soft hearts. We have to have hearts of flesh. And so, man, when somebody's walking around and we find them, and listen, we're not talking about saving the world. We're talking about who is in front of you and how can you help them. And when you have the heart and the spirit and the presence of Christ, you say, absolutely, I'm helping. That's Jesus. And when you don't, man, you're cold-hearted. Something hasn't happened yet. Or else you just starved that heart, and it's turned to stone again. I'm going to have to get me some of that oxygen back there, too. You know, some of those excuses, you know, the enabling and why don't I get a job, some of that's legit. I don't want to say it's not. Some of that, it's legit. But I just think that we just grab those all the time and use every one of those for reasons to not help people who have need. So if you think like that, would you just start asking Jesus about it? Yeah. Just ask Jesus. You want me to do this, Jesus, or not? And I'll tell you what, if you ask him with sincerity and a willingness, you will get your answer. You will know. It's probably been 35 years ago now, 30 years ago. We had our fourth child on the way, and we lived in a little cracker box house. I figured out that the world is made for families of four. Most houses have 3 bedrooms, and so you can have mom and dad have one, and then 2 kids have their own bedroom. And if you have 3 kids, and your world is family of 5, you can fit into that. Because dining room tables are made for 4, cars are made for 4, houses are made for 4, but you can fit 5 in that. You can get 3 tiny little butts in the back seat of a car. Yeah. You can add a folding chair to the table, and there's room for that plate. You can double up on whatever gender is the same in one of those bedrooms. So when the 6th one came, we were in trouble. We can't fit in this house. How are we going to do this? It was a tiny little house. And we were like poverty line, below poverty line income. We couldn't buy a new house. But still, we had a friend who was a realtor, and she was just showing us options. And she showed us one that we're just like, why are we here, man? We're never going to be able to afford this house. It had 5 bedrooms. Come to find out, the couple who lived there was an older couple, empty nesters, didn't need all that space. They were moving out of town. And they were very active in their church. They had Bible studies in that house. And they had youth group over at that house. They had small groups in that house. They did counseling in that house. And it thrilled them when they found out that I was a minister, or we were in the ministry. It thrilled them that they knew that house could be used for those same things in the same little community. And they were happy about that. And so they not only gave us a great price, way undervalued, they served as the bank. I just had to pay them. You know? It was a really, really awesome thing. So we just like cry. I remember the first time I took my kids in there, they just started running in circles because you couldn't run in my old house. You know, they actually can move in this house. It was so fun, so exciting, and we knew it was a gift from God. And so we decided that 2 things. We prayed over that house, over the doors everywhere, that when anybody comes into that house, they feel God's peace. And I got a lot of stories I could tell you about that I don't have time for. But the other thing we decided was this was so obviously a gift from God for us that we would give it back to him. And whenever he needed to use our house, we would let him use our house. When somebody needed a place to stay, they could stay at our house. And I'm not bragging about this, I'm just making a point. We've had over 30 people stay with us through the years, even in other houses since. Now, close to 10 of those were family, which I didn't count, but a lot of them were just, friends and strangers that came in. And we had, like the very first one was a young girl, 15, who'd been kicked out of her house, and she didn't have any place to stay. She could stay with us. We had a woman who was pregnant and abandoned by her husband. Didn't have any place to stay, so she stayed with us. We had a wife and 3 little kids whose husband had been deployed, and they had to sell their house, and so they stayed with us. And all those things were just so joyful. We were able to bring reconciliation with a teenage girl. My wife became the Lamaze class, or the Lamaze coach for the lady who was pregnant and went into the delivery room with her. It was really a cool thing, this really neat bond. I'm sure she did better than I did under the circumstances. The family was reunited with their husband overseas. They were able to get a house over there. So we had all these great endings, and it was really a cool thing to see happen. And then we had a homeless guy stay with us. And he had a crack cocaine addiction. And I didn't know it, but he was using, and he was buying on my front porch. My front porch was kind of the place to connect, I'm sure everybody thought that was pretty funny. It's all going on underneath my nose. I'm a minister in one of the local churches there. And it was hard because we were able to get him a job, but he didn't have a car. And I'm sure you understand this. My wife was not happy being there when he was there, and I'm not there. We couldn't go out and leave our kids alone with him. And so I don't remember, it was either 6 months or 6 months or 9 months we had him there. And, things were going well, and he had some financial stuff we were to help him with. And he just left and went back to everything. We got him cleaned up. He just went back to everything that he had been doing. And that was so deflating and so defeating that it kind of took some of that, be generous with your house, out of us. You follow me? Just kind of, like, man, that was a bad experience. I don't know if I want to do that again. So now let's fast forward to the winter before COVID. And there's a small church in Springfield that feeds people who are disadvantaged, many of whom are homeless, every Tuesday night. And the church was started by some people from this church. And so we've teamed up with them. They're too small to do all that. Sometimes you have to feed 60, 70 people. They don't have the finances for that. They don't have the people for that. So we put together a team, and we go over there, or we did before COVID. And by the way, if you were involved in that, it's going to open back up in May or June. And so I'm there one of these nights, and it's a winter night, and the night before the temperature reached 9 below, and that night it's going to be that cold again, or colder. And the night we're there and we're feeding people, one of the regulars is not there because he died the night before. He froze to death in a truck crate. Another guy was not there because he had frostbite on his hand. He was in the hospital and he had lost fingers. He had to amputate fingers. So that's what was going on. So here we are. We know that both these guys are not going to be there. And we're feeding these folks. And by the way, you guys are the ones that put a new kitchen together, because it's really cool. It's like a restaurant situation. We take their orders and we serve them and we clean up after them, just giving them dignity. It's a very, very cool thing. And you guys, I don't know if you remember, you bought kitchen and dining room tables and redid the whole building. It's very, very cool. So one of the guys comes in that I don't know that I'd seen him before. Maybe I had. And he's got 3 pair of pants on. And he's so loaded up with jackets, he could hardly move. Now, what does that tell you about him? He's homeless. He's homeless. And, man, that starts a wrestling match in me. That starts a wrestling match with God and me so hard, because I have a new heart, and I have a new spirit, and I have the Holy Spirit, and I have the presence of Christ. And oh man, if I take him home, what happens tomorrow when we have to go to work? And we probably got 2 more months of cold weather, and is he going to stay with us the whole time? And am I going to have to stay home now because I can't do evening meetings or counseling or Bible study? Or I can't do any. It just cramps up my ministry. What in the heck am I going to do about this? And I got this wrestling match going on inside of me, and the new heart and the new spirit lost. And I went home after we cleaned up. And on my way home, I started to tear up because I saw this incredible chasm between who I am and what I'm doing. You follow this? This big chasm. Like who I am as a follower of Christ is not someone who would leave someone in those circumstances, and I did. And I started to cry. And it got so bad that I had to pull off the side of the road because I was more than weeping. I was sobbing in my eye. You know how like the windshield gets really blurry when you got water in your eyes, you know? I couldn't even see. I just pulled off and I'm crying. And I would like to tell you that I turned around and went back and got him, and he got his life together and lived happily ever after. I never saw him again after that. I don't know what happened to him. And the reason I tell you all that, church, is because when I act like a goat, when I don't follow that new heart and that new spirit in me, it's crushing. Man, you're crying. It feels so rotten and inauthentic and untrue inside of us. But when I follow and I listen to that new heart and I act like a sheep, there is an incredibly deep joy and satisfaction because I am in sync with that new heart, and I am in sync with that new spirit, and I am in sync with Jesus Christ and how he's told me to live. And it makes me think I'm going to hear, come, be with me. Come, you're blessed. Come, you have an inheritance. And so I recognize that gap in me, and I working on this passage just challenged me to close the gap, and I'm not going to bring it like this overnight, and neither are you, but I'm asking you that we're leading into a season where we as a church are going to look more and more for ministries and action, and we're going to do that stuff, and we're asking you to join us. Will you close the gap with us? Will you close the gap? Will you hear, church? Will you hear from that glorious Jesus on the throne, surrounded by angels? Hey, come, enjoy your inheritance and be blessed. Listen, this is what we want him to say, and this is what he's going to say. Be blessed. In fact, I would love it if you would say that to somebody beside you here today. Would you just go ahead and tell someone around you, say, be blessed. All right, not everybody doing it. I'm not moving. Let's go. I got supper at home. Come on. Be blessed. That's right. Be blessed. How cool is it? You're going to hear that from the glorious King, the one who's on the throne, the one who comes back as a conquering king. And he's going to say to his people, be blessed. Be blessed. You are blessed by God. God has prepared a place for you. He is for you. He's on your side. And we are not goats. Listen, we are not goats. We are sheep. We are his people. And we will hear, come. We will hear, you are blessed. And we're going to sing that. Will you sing that? Will you sing it from your heart? Stand up. We're going to sing, be blessed. And you tell the people around you. You let it sink into your heart. You be blessed. This is who you are. We are sheep. Let's worship and honor him.
Jesus.